All right, so we are back for session 2 of day 1 of Tres Dan Tiens y 7 chakras. And we're going to finish up our Dan Tien discussion and then move into our chakra exploration. Sound good to y'all? Great. So just quickly before we dive in, anything from this morning's discussion, learning, or practice that you want to share or ask about before we go on, before I start just steamrolling my way into content? What do you say, Jim?
I was totally spaced out.
Yeah, that'll happen.
I walked out of my room and I was like, wow. I don't know. It just totally spaced me out.
This is good. This is good. Yeah, because, you might need that.
It wasn't a bad space out. It was very,
Yeah. So that's a good place, to go into one of those naps. You get a little yoga nidra in there. And sometimes as we are doing this, sometimes things will just space you out. But one of the things that can happen is that as we shift out of gross orientation and into the subtle, it's like we need to actually take a little vacation from embodiment. The goal is integrated, dignified, embodied, non-dual, blah, 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 full spectrum. But sometimes when we do these practices, it wakes us up to the fact that, like, wait a minute, I'm more than just, change and duality. Like, I'm the unchanging witness, floating through the vast sky of appearances. Is there life in my hands? So yeah, cool.
That's it.
Groovy, dude. All right, good job. How about you, Deborah? Something to report or a question or complaint or anything?
Yeah, just a question based on a comment right before the break, which was needing to balance all three together instead of just toggling in between them. So the toggling question brought up this whole thing to me around multitasking and the fact that you never really multitask, you just quickly toggle. And so what does it mean to not be toggling and yet in balance?
That's a great question, isn't it? There's a lot of philosophy and science on like how perception even happens. Like, can you be seeing something and smelling something at the same time? Like, different Buddhist schools are like, no, they're happening like this. And then others are like, no, dude, you can see and smell at the same time. What are you talking about? Right. But both of those perspectives are kind of true. Like, if you were to look at, like, I have my perspective here. There's a Tibetan deity image and a computer with all of you American deities, and then there's a keyboard, and there's all this stuff, and I can take that in as a gestalt, right? Like, it's like I don't have to go like, oh, don't see the Tonka painting because you're focusing on the computer, right? But then in perceptual theory, they also say that some part of how we make that is the eyes go Tonka, computer, keyboard, Deborah, cat, Matt, and it is rapid fire making a tapestry that feels like one whole thing, but it's actually diverse. So kind of both, functionally speaking, kind of both. So then when we apply it to this, it's a great question, in my opinion, because as we train, like some of y'all, I know this has been true for me, but it might even be more true for some of you. Some of y'all might have the experience that you can't open your heart and stay in your body. Has anybody ever heard of this? Right? Or sometimes this happens with, like, if you had crummy relationships and then like you want to have sex and it's never as good, like this is a hypothetical situation, right? It's never as good when you actually care about the person, because you can't be in your body and your heart at the same, because you don't know how, right? And so it's like either we care or we get to business, right? And then other people, like, they can't think and feel at the same time, right? Like your partner comes to you with a problem and you feel a lot of compassion, and then you immediately shift to strategy making, and you don't realize that you did that because it so easily helps you stop feeling, right? Now you're thinking, right? And it's very, like, we went through that whole empathy dojo, most of us here, to start to develop the skills by which you could be sitting with someone, embracing their whole experience, and then be able to go, well, would you like to explore some strategies together? Like, while your heart is open. What? That's crazy. But it can happen. But for training purposes, it's kind of like the thing of, if you've ever tried to cultivate a physical discipline, you'll, especially ones that like depend on speed or rhythm, or even like piano is a physical discipline, or drumming or something like that, you'll know that you can get it to a point where you can do it as long as you don't think, right? And then the minute you go, I've got it, and so those centers, they can't do that at the same time. But then there are folks who have developed such a degree of mastery that they can let this, and then they're fucking talking to the guy next door, like, oh yeah, did you see that thing? And I'm over here, like, as an amateur drummer, going like, what? Like, how do you do that? And so that would be maybe an example of, they can put their body on autopilot and then dissociate, right? They're not like really necessarily focusing on the drumming, but they let the trained beast of their body do that. But then there's another thing where, like, to play guitar and sing, for example, and to do it with any soul, you have to be able to be fully immersed in the guitar playing and fully immersed in the singing at the same time. How do you do that? Well, as we know, it's different channels of training in our minds. So you have to train being a really good guitar player, right? And part of that is going to be, well, I can't do anything else while I do that. I have to just play guitar. I can't think, I can't talk, I can't watch TV. I'm playing guitar until it's basically like automatic. And then you go and you train with your vocal coach. And you do that, and then you don't think. You're like, nope, I'm moving my diaphragm like this. I'm doing a glottal, I'm doing a flip and chest and head voice and blah, 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 right? And then, okay, and then you go and you try to do both of those together, and it's terrible for a minute. But what you're doing is you're learning to rapid fire toggle, right? You're like, okay, guitar, go, la, 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 shit, I lost it. Okay. Guitar, dun 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 dun. I'm writing you a song right now as we talk. That's the guitar line. And then, okay, what's the vocals? La 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 la. Okay. And then, okay, guitar, do your thing. Dun 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 la 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 la. Oh shit, I got it. And then it falls apart. But eventually it does seem possible that we can have both of those going on. Okay, so that was a long description on that, but hopefully fun and descriptive. So in our developing these centers of ourselves, this is kind of what we want to do, right? And we do it in that meditation where I go, feel your body, okay, feel your breath, okay, notice your mind. Now see if you can notice all three of those together. And what will likely happen, what often happens for me when I'm starting my practice that day, is I'll go, okay, body, mind, breath, and the trick is you have to shift into a more inclusive consciousness that can hold all three of those. At least that's how I would describe how it feels, right? Because if I try, like, usually what happens is like you go to the mind, and then the mind tries to feel the breath in the body. Oh, that didn't work. Okay, get to the body. Now body, try to feel no, that didn't work. You have to get, who's this fourth state that can have all of those within it at the same time, or something like that. And then at that point, you're not toggling anymore. So both, I would say both. Does that speak to what you were asking?
Yeah, it does. And yeah, it does in some levels. I think that I'm not really sure how to put this. because definitely we want to come as full spectrum whole people in that witness consciousness that embraces all of it, embodied and the oneness. And in life, there's also often times of like the toggling of the, okay, we're going into the meditative space and trying to bring that into the, getting your oil changed or whatever the thing is, on the like 3D realm, while being in the heart with the, with the traffic that's happening and the way there. I mean, ultimately, right, that's part of the goal of the practice, is to be able to hold all of that at the same time. And what am I trying to ask? I'm not even really sure what I'm trying to ask, but just in the going through how to fully embody that. Well, that's the point of the Qigong practice, right? So, yeah.
You got it. Especially as I'm going to present it, like what you're saying is the deal. It's that full spectrum being. And then, but within that, in Buddhism, in case you want to take a note, you're welcome to on this. It's not in your class outline, but it's something cool. In tantric or yogic Buddhism, they say you have to cultivate both wisdom and skillful methodology. Wisdom and skillful methodology. And what wisdom is, and this is kind of like that upper and lower Dan Tiens polarity. Wisdom is the direct recognition of like underlying unity as absolute unfolding, all possibility, creativity, right? And then methods, that's how they usually translate it, but we could translate it as like appropriateness, or a good tantric translation would be like spontaneous appropriateness. That would be a good of top, or upaya in Buddhism. And this is like when you go to the car wash, I think was the example that we used. You go to the car wash and like, you probably don't want to feel like Jim reported feeling after the Qigong, which is because you have to drive a car. Like, so, but it's knowing, as we've practiced these mixings and blendings, it's knowing that you don't have to just divorce yourself from that state to get into car driving state. You emphasize the driver as an ornament of your full spectrum being. Kind of like that, right? And it's kind of like, oh, I've got this computer. Right now I'm emphasizing Zoom. And in that, we're utilizing a camera and a mic and an external microphone to make sure this recording sounds good, and etc. And it's got all these other capacities. Later, I might use iMovie and not use Zoom at all, right? And the whole time, it's all a computer. It's got all these capacities, but I'm emphasizing some of the others. This is kind of this yogic view of this. And what we tend to do in our unintegrated state, and this is, again, you're great with the segue questions today, I think, because this gets right into like what our next subject is we'll tend to forget that we're the entire MacBook, and we will think I am a Zoom meeting. Here's mysticism for modern people. You forget that you're the fucking internet, right? Like more than just a MacBook, you are the whole internet, dude. And we're co-creating apps and okay, I'll work this out. You'll see a TikTok about it later. But we go, oh, I am a Zoom meeting. I am a Zoom meeting. And then if we've done a little practice, we can go like, well, sometimes I'm a Zoom meeting and sometimes I'm Facebook. Okay. Like I can be both, but like when we're in the Zoom meeting, we mostly forget that we're also Facebook. And we mostly forget that we're also the site that lets you check and update your voter registration. And we're also the site whose name I forget, but it's like, it's a little gamified climate change activism site where you go and click, oh, I can plant 3 trees this year. Oh, I will use human powered tools in my yard work rather than gas or electric tools. You're also that, right? But so please just allow me to run with this metaphor for a minute, if you don't mind. But you might get in a Zoom meeting where we're mourning together or something. and we go like, oh, geez, because I had this yesterday, right? Come up, we were doing some emotional alchemy, and somebody was like, "Oh, dude, the apocalypse. That sucks. I couldn't do the alchemy because the minute I sat down, it was just the overwhelming apocalypse of it all." And I was like, yeah, right. But in that case, to a degree, it's like you know that you're in this Zoom meeting of mourning, and you forget about the voter registration site, and you forgot about the climate change activism site, and you forgot about the petition you were going to sign on moveon.org, and you forgot about this meetup that you were going to do, and you forgot about your local community network building stuff that's facilitated through that same, and we identified with one to the expense of the other. So to boil it all down, thanks for letting me get here. The problem is not identifying with an attribute, it's doing so at the expense of your full spectrum. Yeah, because like sleep, for example, just to get really yogic, and then we'll get back into curriculum. Sleep, for example, is so restorative. Oh my gosh, the research on sleep, like if you have chronic pain, if you can get good sleep, it like reduces your experience of pain like 20% or some ridiculously wonderful number. And then psychological issues, like not to downplay, sometimes you need to take your meds for depression, sometimes you need to go to counseling and take ecstasy with your partner or whatever, in a clinical setting, of course. But whatever. And if you just get a good night's sleep, it can like fix a bunch of the anxiety and depression you had. Like, boop, you woke up, you're like, oh shit, I feel better. Like sleep is a miracle. And it's because you are solely identified with the causal aspect of your being when you are asleep. So much so that the gross aspect of our being can't even remember. It was like, oh, there was causal me. That's different than waking up gross me. And only when you dip into the subtle to dream is that close enough to our everyday consciousness that we remember that it happened. The rest of the time is just like, how'd you sleep? Oh, so good. I was out. Yeah, you are out of body. You are out. But more importantly, you are out of personality. You had an out of personality experience. And there's so much healing because the whole body goes like, oh, she's gone. Let's fix everything before she gets back. Hurry. She's gonna come and screw it up again with her personality. So like in that case, like there's no problem that we're solely identified with the causal. Like that's a good thing. But then when we wake up and we're solely identified with the gross, that's not such a good thing. But what we can do is like, we're going to go through the day, we're going to drive a car. You should be like 99% gross identified while you're driving a car. And then in the back of your mind, you go, yeah, but I'm the one who's continuous while I'm asleep, while I'm doing Qigong, while I'm having visionary experiences. And so I'm going to drive the car as if we were all part of a greater unity from which visionary experiences emerge. And so what's that? Oh, I'm going to be as aware and grounded as possible. That's how I would bring my full spectrum being, right? If I was giving my partner a massage, right? Like it wouldn't be kind or appropriate for me to be like, okay, I want her to really feel how connected we are, so I'm going to disassociate into my knowledge of unity. I'd be trying to bring that through my hands and like be as present as possible. Okay, so blah, 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 blah. Hopefully that speaks to something in there. If not, that's the rest of the course. And then ask again if we still didn't get it. Okay, moving on. Let's go. We're back from lunch. So we got our 3 centers, and these are, for our purposes, dignified embodiment, open-hearted compassion, and lucid wakefulness. You could say that these are the 3 elixirs that we are cultivating in these 3 centers, or of these 3 centers. And then the main purpose for us today is to learn how to balance these and bring them into integration and harmony. Similar to that last question, actually, is what one of the things we left off is that Taoist practice places a great emphasis on that lower center. So we're saying the same thing. I'm saying you have to have all of it in harmony, and we spend much more time on that belly chakra, or that belly Dan Tiens in this case. I try to use my language very specifically. And that's because it's appropriate while you have a physical body and you think you are you, to do that in a dignified way. That's where you can start, because that's what you can get your hands on, and you're less likely to go bird tracking somewhere. So with that, let's do a little exercise, an experiential exercise. Are you ready for that kind of action? Experiential exercise? You are. Okay, so yeah, so contemplating your navel, right, is how they used to say this when they wanted to denigrate yogic and Buddhist practice. And why? Because we believe we are a head, so gross identified and disembodied. That's how powerful Western consumer capitalist paradigm is. It can both be completely disembodied and completely gross identified at once. Wow. Okay, so this is a walking meditation. If you don't have a lot of room in your space, like I'm imagining what I can't see of Janelle's space, but I think there's a bed there or something. You could just walk. You don't have to be in flow. We're just going to do it with a little walk. So you can walk in a tiny circle. It'll all be fine. But we are going to walk the 3 Dan Tiens. Some of you may have done this with me a long, long time ago. I don't think I've taught it for a long, long time, but here's how it goes. So you're just going to take a walk in your space, right? I have this little bit of space, so I'm gonna make a figure 8. There's no real physical method to this walking. It's just take a walk. Okay, and we'll do our basic mindfulness. Just notice your body as you walk. Notice your breath. Notice your mind. You could do this if you don't want to walk or it's uncomfortable. You could do this sitting. The walking seems to add something to it. So just check it out. Okay, so you're just noticing. Now, bring your awareness to that belly center, just the whole tummy, and walk from your tummy. It's just an inner thing, right? You're not trying to change your walk. Your walk might change. You're walking from that center of gravity. So notice what's different when you do that. Does anything change in your breath, your body, your mind, your emotions? Walking from that tummy center. Okay, then come on back. Okay, so now teamwork. Did you notice anything change? What changed when you walked from your belly center? Yeah, so Jim makes a mudra like this, right? You can feel a drop perhaps in that energy being in your breath. Sometimes people's breath will actually drop. Sometimes the mind gets quiet. Or you feel heavier. You may actually feel heavier. What else do people notice? Did you notice any change? Let's see. Felt more grounded? Yes, felt more grounded from the chat box. What else? Others? Anything else? Janelle agrees with the grounded, I think. Something else? What do you say?
Definitely more like deeply rooted. I felt like I'm more kind of up here right now, and it kind of placed that center of gravity a little bit lower into my pelvis and kind of locked it in a little better. I felt it more on the bottoms of my heels. As I was walking, there was a difference there too. And even in my throat, I noticed there was like a heaviness, a deepening in the throat when I was doing it too.
That sounds really nice, actually. I don't know. That's not how
I think I needed that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I needed that right now. Yeah. I'm a little space cadet right now.
And your experience actually speaks to that skillful means aspect a little bit too, because you can do all the stuff you need to do in your head from down here. That's the false dichotomy we often get caught up in. They're like, oh, well, I got a lot to think about. I better put my center of gravity. No, you can be grounded and healthy and take deep breaths and still think just fine. It's pretty cool. Okay. And then felt like a tiger walking. Yes, sometimes you'll get a prowling sense out of this, for sure. Anything else? Anything contradictory in there? What do you say, Kat?
Slight brag. I had been already.
Nice. Yeah.
You're
That's
like,
nice to know, isn't it?
like, oh, I am. That was
This is great. This is great. Good job. Yes. Carla, what do you say?
I felt similar to what other people have been expressing. And also I noticed oddly that my knee joints cracked and got my body got kind of more imbalanced physically as well.
That can happen sometimes. The posture will align itself when we come from that center of gravity. Oddly, like we're not intentionally changing our posture, but somehow you settle in and you're like, it's like more ergonomically correct or something like that. So neat. Okay, two things for if you ever, I mean, this isn't one that you'll really teach in a Qigong class. There are ways to teach it, but I'll show you those another time. But should you have an opportunity, like you're at a festival or something, and they're like, what are the Dan Tiens? Give us a 15-minute lesson. And you're like, oh, I'll try this walking thing. Sometimes people won't get anything because they've disassociated from this center. And so they're like, nothing happened. So that can often be because like they just can't get their consciousness in there. And then the other is that occasionally this will bring up embodied psychological material that is too much to handle. So a little caution. I mean, these are pretty benign exercises, right? Take a walk, feel from your tummy, but I'm teaching you level 2 stirs because you've got the whole compassion alchemy protocol to get them through while you recommend a somatic therapist, right? So you're like, oh yes, tell me more. Oh, huggy, Tong Len, great. Now here's the card of somebody I know who's really going to help you with this. That seems really shocking that came up during Qigong practice. Yes, I can understand how destabilizing that would be. Do you feel stable enough now to go make this call to the somatic therapist, right? So just to know, it doesn't often happen, but that can occasionally occur. How to get back in for those who are blocked in one area or another. It's mostly just all of these practices, right? Time. So, and we'll do more as we go. So the practices that we'll do during this day, we'll get some specifics as we go. Okay, you got to do your second Dan Tiens. So now we have a comparison. So I want you to remember a little bit. Oh, was there tiger prowling? Was there heaviness? Was there stuff, right? Now we're going to walk or sit or lie down, whatever you need to do. But the walking works the best in this. And let's give it a try. So you take a walk and you're neutral. You're neutral. Try not to like activate anything. And just feel body, breath, mind. You can feel as if you had an energy field around you, whatever. Okay, and then move from your heart as if your heart was the center of gravity. And if any of these do feel uncomfortable, just go back to whatever feels comfortable. Move from your heart as if your heart was the center of gravity. And what changes? Do you have feelings that change somatically or emotionally? Does the way your mind is working change? Does the way you're walking change? Okay, then let that go. Come back to neutral and come back to your chair or whatever you were at. Okay, let's report. What say thee? Different? The same? What did you notice? Yeah, Jim's doing Sufi dancing. Ya fatah. Ya fatah. That's a common one. Janelle looked like it was, I don't know, more challenging or weird or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like I totally burst into tears.
Yeah, that'll happen. You're right on track, buddy.
Yay, I guess.
Yay!
Hooray! Yay!
Yeah, I felt there was this really cool, blissful, like what Jim was expressing, and a little anxious. I was like, oh, neat. Oh no. Okay. How do I ride the boundary line of neat and oh no. So that was me. What does Miko say?
Very similar to yours, neat and oh no. Like I had that like, oh, like it felt like I uplifted, like my body like integrated and got like taller, and felt spacious bliss, and then anxiety as well. Like my heart started palpitating a little bit more. And
Yeah.
it was like, oh, I don't know about this feeling, and I started feeling a little ungrounded.
Yes. Yeah, I had a similar, like I felt like a dancer. Like there was this horizontal opening as I went, which had that kind of postural, like, wow, oh, neat. So it changes our posture. That was much less of a tiger walking and much more of like the avatar state or something. So that's fun. Okay. And then Deborah says, a smile came automatically. Yes, that can be the awakening of intrinsic joy from this center. And we can, regardless of what your experience is, I think we can kind of sense these other aspects from one another, right? And if you try these on different days, you'll also get different aspects. So it's pretty neat. But that's the beauty of as a group. We can grow faster together than we could on our own because we have this many more perspectives to take. Jim, what else? What do you say?
Oh, I felt like a crane. Or blue heron.
Yes.
Moving. It almost felt, even though my chin was not past, it felt like my chin was out in front of me.
Interesting.
So it was very strict.
Yeah, so you had a kind of a forward movement. That's very similar to in yoga tradition, there are 5 main winds of your body, 5 pranas, 5 vayus. And this one is the prana vayu. This is its seat. And the pra in prana is the same root word as we have in forward, prana, forward, and like the prow of a ship. So that's the sort of emergent wind of the body, has its seat here. So sometimes you'll feel that, yeah. More advanced stuff for you later. We don't have time right now, but most of the time we'll also work with the front when we think of this. And there's also an expansion to the back you can try that will bring you totally different experiences. And so that's fun, but do that on your own. Okay. Kat, what do you say? Oh, you remuted. There you go.
Sorry. I think it's interesting, sort of my different experience from a couple people saying that it brought up some anxiety, because what I realized when I did it was that that's the posture I take when I am having anxiety about going into a room of people I don't know, or teaching a class or something. Even going up to a barista I don't know and ordering coffee, I can get a little weird.
You puff up a little?
Yeah. And so but not puff up in a armored way, puff up in an open, loving, let's connect, way. So it actually, that's what I do to bring my anxiety down. So
yeah, what an interesting yoga.
Yeah.
And it really speaks to the spectrum of experiences, like, because in Chinese medicine, if there's anxiety happening because there's too much heat in the heart, that's like a presence of qi. And if you brought more, then you would feel that exacerbate your anxiety. But one paradigm, in this chakra paradigm, if the heart center were constricting, the natural flow of prana would try to move through there, and then you'd feel anxiety. And so if you deconstrict the heart chakra, you'll feel, and that would cure the anxiety. Cure. This statement was not approved by the FDA.
That's the one.
Yeah, so it's really cool. And that's why you can't teach one size fits all Qigong or yoga, because one size does not fit all. But we can do exercises like this, and you learn it from the inside out organically. So that's fun. And you'll remember way back when we did meridian stuff, this is also how to empower the yang of your lungs. puff up that chest. And so that metal element, it's similarly in that prana vayu, right? The breath aspect of that forward energy evokes the courage of the lungs. So all of those can be in there, and they're less fun if it's like a what is it, but more fun as like which one speaks to me, which one seems to draw out the nuance of my experience. How can I learn about myself from this? That's fun. Let's do the third center, shall we? Up you go. Ooh, my heart chakra just kicked in. I'm ready for the third center. All right. So neutralize. You might want to do a tremble horse to just neutralize. Ooh, I'll do this one too, just for me, because it's fun. A little bouncy bounce. All right, cool. Then walk it neutral. And just chill. What's my body like? What's my breath like? What's my mind like? You will have a little accumulative effect. These are Qigong exercises, so you'll be different than when you started, but just try to be like, okay, I'm just noticing. Then walk from the upper center. Walking from the upper Dan Tiens, as if that's the center of your energy body. Good, then pause. Just take note, and let's do a pulling down the heavens and just bring that back down. Just because it can be a little destabilizing to stay up there. So that's why that one got an extra. All right, let's hear how that went for you. How was that one? Different? The same? Boring? Wonderful? Psychedelic? What do you say, Jim?
As soon as you said, take it up here, my eyes dilated.
Whoa.
And my vision changed.
Yeah.
It was pretty physical. I mean, immediately, the second you said, take it up, the eyes went.
Yeah. That's neat.
So it was pretty cool. I didn't feel out of balance or anything, but
yeah. Notice, but it definitely had an effect.
Yes, I was bringing in more information. I was bringing in. I don't know if it was physical or emotional or spirit, but it was. I could bring more was coming in.
Yeah, that's cool. That actually seems to be actually a very balanced opening of that center, because that's the lucid wakefulness thing, right?
Yeah.
It usually takes me a couple days of Zen retreat to get to that point, or the right kind of Qigong practice. But you get to this place where it's like you don't have to think, and thus the sensory world can arrive in its fullness. That's one aspect of that. What are other aspects that people experience? Same, different, new? Miko.
I went to this place that had happened the other night of like vast, spacious bliss after doing Zikr.
Yeah.
That it was the like immediate response. And then as I like stayed there for a little bit, I started feeling like, oh, this feels nice and comfortable. And then I'm like, oh, I don't feel my body anymore. And I'm like, oh, that's that comfortable feeling of dissociation.
Yes.
Yeah, it didn't feel totally balanced, but it was there at first, and then it kind of went to this like patterned way of relating to that center.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. And there's that thing of like, more is not necessarily better. You want the right dose. Like, these are dosage dependent inner medicines, maybe. I don't know. Just one tangent. I better say it before I forget. But in like in the Dzogchen tradition, one of your consciousnesses is body consciousness, but it doesn't mean just like your embodiment. It means the sense of being a separate being. And So even if you were like in a subtle, on the astral plane in a subtle body, you would still have that body consciousness. Or even if you're in a formless realm, but you still had a sense that I am in the formless realm, you would still have that. And so to transcend that is bliss. That is great bliss, because thinking that you really are a separate being is the fictive aspect of our awareness. Now, it doesn't mean you don't show up that way or that doesn't function. It just doesn't function absolutely. And so what's interesting, this is how we, maybe I'll write a great book called Dancing on the Edge of Spiritual Bypassing, but it's one of the places where we dance on the edge, because there is great bliss on the other side of fictive body consciousness, but there is not great bliss in renouncing embodiment. Because you would have to separate yourself from the embodied realm to do that. And then thus you've made another freaking partition. We're trying not to partition here. It's a petition to not partition. Okay, so anyway, this is the kind of fun stuff that you get when you get in this upper center. What else did people experience in the chat box? More mentally directed, but less in tune with the environment. Yes, that occurs. Tell me more.
Yeah, so that was really interesting. The first time that I did it, it was kind of like from my head more than the connection with all that is. And that's where I got that comment from. It felt like the business person ready to do the thing. And I almost felt like I had blinders on.
Yes.
And then as I was hearing some of the other feedback, it was like, oh yeah, upper Dan Tiens, that connection with all that is, and did it again and felt an entirely different feeling around that. But both times I didn't feel it as dropped into my body. And that first time when I went into directive, it was like not noticing that there's, the refrigerator over there, like whatever those things are, like the blinder piece. And
Yes.
the other is expansive.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Because we want to know that is one of the, none of these symptoms are benign or malignant. Or centers. None of the symptoms of these centers are benign or malignant. They're just the spectrum of experience. And so this one is directive and disembodied and focused, which is why if you can do that from a yogi angle, you can develop single-pointed concentration, right? That doesn't really happen from here. This is like the multitasking mommy, able to respond to all the needs in the moment. This one is disassociating daddy, right? No, I can't help drinking a beer. Sorry, right? And that's just as much part of this center as we're all unity consciousness. Right? Those are like two manifestations of the same phenomenon. So that's cool. More on that later. And then similarly with that sense of the Dan Tiens, what the cool thing about the Dan Tiens as a field, one of the valences of meaning in that is that it's this whole region. And like in one Taoist tradition, there are 9 palaces or chambers of your upper Dan Tiens. And so like this one in the front is one aspect. And this one up here is a different aspect. And then this pineal pituitary gland is a different aspect. And you'll get different stuff from each of those different spots, right? So some of it is you get what you ask for. So like what I wanted while we walked was I wanted like the raw, like what happens if you go up here? What happens, right? And then on your second one, you were like, oh yeah, but what if this was the center of communion? And when you walk from that, you're going to get that, right? You're going to get more of that. Like if we walked from here, I was like, what if this was the center of innate open-hearted compassion that already knew it was already connected? If I like prompted you in that way, we'd get more of that, which is great news. Thank goodness. But I wanted to get us the mix of what happens when we do these as like defaults in our system to hide, what happens when we do them as techniques to meditate, and then, and by that we'll get to like, well, what's the baseline underneath? Like what's the generic upper Dan Tiens? So really cool feedback. Yeah. Okay. Anybody more want to tell me? Kat, what do you say?
So similar to Jim, all of a sudden I just became a giant eyeball.
Yeah.
And the image that popped in my head was, from Lord of the Rings, actually, like giant eyeball. But in that same way, it was a little bit judgmental. And I kept seeing, I was problem solving. Everywhere I looked, there was a
Yes.
problem. There was shorts on the ground he picked up. I went into kind of like this over functioning mom mode of, oh my God, there's dirty dishes and this and this and this and this and this. And so I just started seeing all these things. It was very intense and a little uncomfortable.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's, we hear in our common language, right? Oh, get out of your head. Oh, I was too much in my head, et cetera. And that's focusing on this part, the pathological part is, and then like the pathological part, what Deborah expressed as the enjoyable version, which is cool. I love that you experimented with like, what are the different possibilities, is kind of less the head and more this like crown center. And so in that, the pathological version, we would say, oh, you're a space cadet, right? Because this is the space element transcending personal embodiment. So you've got like Jim expressed, actually the name of this third eye chakra is Ajna, beyond knowing, or it's like unknowing, but not like ignorance. It's like gnosis, beyond knowledge. And that's one thing you might get, but you might also get Sauron's glare. And that's like the generic nature of this thing, is it's this sharp, kind of very visual seeming, focus, and it could go either way. This is the flavor I want you to start to get. So it could go either way. Oh, he's so heart-centered. Oh, I'm having heart palpitations. They're how are you using that basic potential in that center? And if we can get that, whoa, we've got some tools, right? To understand we're using these centers that have certain potentials. How are we using? How would we like to use them? Janelle, did you have something?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out how to express what my experience was, and through the course of everyone explaining how they felt, I was able to better put that together, because it was kind of a combination of a lot of those at once, sort of jumping back and forth between that, like, oh, I need to turn the air off, oh, I hear a sound, oh, there's this thing in my way, and then I would jump to this thing where like there was this silver cord pulling me up, lifting my soft palate, making me feel the arches in the bottom of my feet. And all of a sudden it's like a fountain floating all over. Oh, but the air conditioning, and oh, but that sound. And oh, I didn't take Liam's temperature before I sat back down. And oh, the fish want to eat. And then I go, oh, no, back up there again. And it just kept bouncing back and forth and back and forth. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's like ADD land in here right now. But that's, I mean, it is anyway, but, but I definitely felt that. And then the physical presence of like, all of a sudden I became very aware of like the degree of my swaying when I walk, which I'm very rarely aware of, unless I'm doing a lot of like deep work. And then I'll notice like, oh, whoa, I tilted very far to the right this time. Do I do that all the time? I never even notice it until I'm like deep into work. So it was odd to me that I was so aware of it so quickly after doing something that wasn't like super intensive, really taking the time to sort of jump to like, oh, there we are. That's odd. So it was all over the place.
That is amazing. Yeah. And so I think we could say like what that helps me to kind of frame, to give you guys some stuff to put in your notes, as well as just these exercises, is like this center is about awareness, or wakefulness in our slogan, right? It doesn't necessarily mean lucid wakefulness. That's the yogic part we put in there. The wakefulness is like the generic nature of this upper center, right? So you could have like, Jim got lucky today and he was in like lucid wakefulness. sensory appearances simply arise and they ornament consciousness as a non-dual expanse. Hell yeah. But you could also have wakefulness of the air conditioner and of all the shit that needs to get done around this house. And it's like, and now you're very aware of it. I wasn't as aware of that a minute ago. And my body, oh, wow, what's going on? Wakefulness, right? And then the generic of this one could be like in our slogans, compassion, which isn't always very fun, right? You can have compassion fatigue. You can have, you're more sympathetic to your own emotions, right? So then we've got in the slogan, the yogic part, kind of just applying these as we go. They're not perfect, but like the open-hearted compassion is, it's like, oh, wow, it's a type of compassion that can embrace all experiences. It's spacious enough to allow them all to be there, right? And then similarly in the bottom, you have embodiment, right? That if you're in that center, you're going to feel embodied. Now you might feel embodied as an anxious, fatigued person, or you might feel embodied as like a warrior of the realms, right? So what we cultivate is the dignified embodiment aspect. So you have a generic, and then you have, how do I want to use this, right? How do I want to use this? What do we got? Toggle question. Big sky is not problem solving, so how do I hold them all simultaneously, or should we? Yeah, for now, just toggle. But we're going to do an exercise that'll give you another idea too right now. Yes, being aware of where we're coming from is a very good practice, as far as I've been taught. That's actually in yoga tradition, as we say, gross, subtle, causal, non-dual. Non-dual is sometimes called the fourth state, or turiya in the Sanskrit. And one way to cultivate that is, it is the awareness, regardless of whether you're in gross, subtle, or causal, the awareness itself. And so a way that, ordinary schmoes like me can practice cultivating that turiya is to go, where am I coming from right now? And that actually is some of that integrative awareness. But speaking of integrative awareness, let's do our last one, which is to walk all three or sit all three, whatever you're comfortable with. But let's give it a try, because this one is fun, in my opinion. Okay, taking a walk. We're taking a walk. Just don't do anything. And be aware. What does it feel like to not do anything and just take a walk? Okay, cool. That's what that's like. Okay, and then let's stack them up. So get that belly center. Walk from the belly. And then keep that and add the heart. Walk from the belly and the heart. And then keep that and add the upper Dan Tiens. What does it feel like to walk from all three of those at a time? And don't worry if they're not all like crisp and distinct. It's just a general thing, like, oh yes, I have a head, a heart, and a gut. I walk from them all. Now, one last thing as you just play for a minute, sometimes that crown opens upward very easily. And so you just want to feel as well from your belly, it's also connected under the earth. So you can add that a little, it usually will create a little extra balance for folks. Folks can often go up more easily than they go down. So you can just add that intent. Walking from the three. Oh yeah. All right. And then come on back home. Come on back home. All right, how's it feel? You can feel free to keep that too as you sit if you want. What do you say? Walking from the three? Groovy, neutral, epic, dumb? Miko, what do you say?
Oh, that's so good.
Thank
Yeah, definitely
goodness.
epic. Yeah, and I'm glad that you added that part, because I felt that I lost a little bit of the lower Dan Tiens as we started moving up, and so when we connected with the earth, I felt it like really like land. And then I noticed that I was aware of my, like the inside of my back body, which to me is a very, very balancing experience. To like be it was not only aware, but it was like resting into the inside of my back body. And yeah, it was very good.
Cool. I started feeling it in my back body and it put me in a trance. Hang on, I'm coming back. Okay. Yes, congruent is a great word for how that feels sometimes to some of us. If we can really find it, right? And it's like, oh yes, I have come whole and total to this experience. What else? Anything else to share? Janelle, what do you say?
If I could draw a picture of what that felt like, it might look a little bit like the microcosmic orbit.
Yes.
Yeah, that was wild. The individually, things were just so kind of all over the place, doing their individual things quite wildly. That sort of just felt like one was seeping into the other and sieving up into the other, and one was that the top was going down to fill in the space of the lower one that was all crazy, and this one was going up into the heart to like settle that, and then it just felt like everything was kind of righting itself.
That's cool.
That was super cool.
Yeah. Congratulations on that.
Yes.
Sounds perfect. Woo.
Yes,
Yeah,
I needed
and
that one.
I think stuff like this is where they came up with those microcosmic orbit pictures, right? It's like they were doing this and they were like, whoa, that feels like a river up my spine, but like a rainbow flowing down from my teeth. And it's like, oh, draw a picture of it, Jake. Okay, cool. And then we're the inheritors of that down through the years. So neat. Love it. Yeah. And it's the body's capacity to balance itself out when we ask. So, but you have to know how to ask. This is some teacher, or maybe it was my Sifu, I forget, but it was like, they were talking about how like, ask and it shall be given unto you in the Bible or something like that. But, in the mystical interpretation, it's like, yeah, but they never teach you how to ask. There's just like asking, yes, but you have to actually know how asking works. So these are some, like we had to go through and actually stack them all up. Here's what your heart feels like. Here's what this feels like. Here's what other people are doing. And then you go in and you can actually, what would it feel like to have these three centers harmonizing and cooperating? And what's cool is our deep unconscious goes, oh, I know what that'll feel like. It feels like this. I'm like, oh, thank you. I needed to feel like that. Okay, Jim, what else?
It was an interesting posture exercise because as I brought them online, I could feel my body stacking.
Yeah.
So I started here, and when I brought the heart online, it was like, hum. And then I brought this online and it was like, hum. And so they were all three, they're kind of in line. And I was just following them. It's like my body was following them.
Yeah.
It was very bizarre. It was bizarre how they just stacked up like a transformer.
Totally.
Like, and then boom. And then as I was walking, it was like, it was weird. It was very strange. They were like aligned and leading me around. I don't know if that's accurate, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, it's a cool description for one of the things that can happen with these is that and it's actually part of shifting your center of gravity from gross identification to something else, is that we stop feeling as if the me ego is the one running the show. And that often has to do with your body, but it also has to do with your sense of persona. And so we'll have this sense, this is where in Taoism and in Dzogchen, they talk about, like spontaneity. And it's not that you're out of control. It's that you have become primordially undomesticated or something like that. And we get a glimpse of that in these little meditative moments of like, oh, my body knows what to do, you know, and it's like, oh, and the mind can go like, wait, I don't have to drive. Wow. You know, because when we line things up, it's like we become a conduit or something. You know, that's one of the metaphors that they use. You know, it's like you line up the pipes and you're in a flow state, would be an easy English translation for that. Anything else to report on the 3 as 1? What do you say, Kat?
I think like everybody else, I really enjoyed this one. And what came up for me was the upper dantian. I think what's happening is I can envision like perfection, like this beautiful world, right? And that's what I'm seeing. And then when I'm seeing things that are incongruent with that, like dishes, I was like, ah. But then that one can then resource from the heart and be like, but it's okay. I'm not angry about that. And then that one can resource from the lower because I can pick that up. Like this, like I can do something. Like this one can't do anything about it. But then my lower center can actually do something, and the middle center tells everybody it's okay. So that was great.
I love it. Yeah, that's very similar too to what some folks, we'll get into this more as our workshop goes on, but what some folks feel the microcosmic orbit imagery is all about. Because you will know in some Kundalini, some portrayals of Kundalini practice, there's this sense of going up, 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 up through the ladder of the chakras and spiritual development, up, up, up. And, you know, back in the 80s or something, when I was reading these old West publications that are now like old news, you know, people were like, but the Taoists, they go up and then they come back down, you know, these dudes who started in the 60s. So they're like, you know, they're like, we're my age now, you know, but they were learning, you know, because just a few folks came over. There's Alan Watts and there's Yogananda and there's, you know, a couple other folks, Yogi Bhajan or somebody. And they're like, oh, we learned all this Kundalini, but then the Taoists, like, they go up and they come back down. What is that? But it was this thought of like, yeah, you can go into the unitive and visions of perfection, and then you can take that on back down and ground that into reality. But it's also very similar to what Janelle was saying, is that the centers can resource one another, right? That's this sense of the full spectrum way of being. Jack Kornfield called it the path with heart, right? Was there something else on that? Oh yeah, and then that's also very similar to this wisdom and skillful means in Buddhist practice. That, okay, two torturous poles of existence. Let me tell you about this torturous poles of existence, then we'll go on a break. One, here's the stupid world with all of its problems and you just have to deal with that. 2, here's the perfect world of absolute transcendence and unity, and you just have to give up all your attachment. Torture both ways. Both of those suck. Dude, both of those suck so bad. And then the heart's usually pretty good, but also you can have this like, I'm stuck in the middle. I'm a transcendent being who sees a bunch of problems. Damn it. Your heart's open so you can feel all your emotions about it, which that's a shitty part of spiritual awakening. If you started as a bypasser, let me tell you, then your Sufi master is like, do this mantra, and your heart starts to open. You're like, oh no, I thought that was over. Okay. One paradigm that can help resolve the torture dichotomy is, well, which one was that? Was that Max? No. Okay. I only saw a glimpse and it actually looked like Liam at Janelle's house. So like, wait, how did you guys do that? So one way of helping to resolve the torture dichotomy is not actually, I'm just going to try to spit this poem out and then we'll go on a break. Not so much that you are to be attached to the outcome of fixing all those problems, but the way you express the transcendental unity of the Pure Land from which you came is to contribute your part. So there's this sense, it's not it's a pivot from control to contribution. And one of the reasons we'll tend to bypass or transcend or do all this stuff is because we realize we're out of control down here. Like, if we're honest, we have influence, we can participate. You're never going to be in control in the material realm. There's too much else. Have you seen how small you are compared to everything else? Right. And so you've got two methods. Some people block here. We're getting into the lecture for later, but some people block here and they just forget and they pretend they can control it all. Right. And then other people, we block here and then we say, F that, I'm out. And according to non-dual tradition, now this, I'm going to give you my sect's perspective on things, but according to non-dual tradition, none of that is the reality of your being. And so it all feels kind of partial. The reality of your being is you cannot control, but you must contribute. Because contribution is an expression of your compassionate nature. And that's the best possible thing to do with your life. It's the best possible thing to do with your life. And if you are into growing beyond and transcending beyond, how you do that is developing the muscles of your spiritual being by exercising your compassionate nature, right? You practice who you are and you grow the capacity to be into more and more of that, right? The other great news is that there's this thing, like life coaches and stuff will talk about is like, well, how you get the most clients, how you make the most money is not by learning a bunch of tricks, but by showing up most authentically, because that's where you have the most charisma. Like that is actually, and so if we wanted to influence people, sure, let's say, like I think it's a cool project to reverse climate change, right? I think that's a badass project. Gives me no end of battle with hopelessness, but even with that said, it's a badass project to get involved with. And if I wanted to do the most with that, then my thing would be not trying to control that. Then I'd be like, just fiddling around. I'd be stressing myself out the whole time. But if I came from that as, oh, my spirit calls me to work toward reversing climate change, the energy from that sort of heart center would become so attractive and so influential that I would have my best chance of that by taking it just as my contribution. And then worst case scenario, well, my plan didn't work. Heck, what are we going to do now? I would have used all of that time on planet Earth as a gym to grow the muscles of my soul body or whatever comes next in that transcendent mode. And so we're balancing this earth heaven conduit. This is non-dual practice, is somehow it includes, I don't know if it tortures you the same way, but me as an early spiritual bypassing adopter, I was like, wait a minute, you're supposed to not be attached and you're supposed to love others. How do I take care of my spouse and also practice non-attachment? Because I tried just doing non-attachment. That was a fiction. That was just a self-defense mechanism, right? I tried doing attachment. That's why I went spiritual bypasser in the first place. So the tantric view is you work your freaking keister off with no sense that you're going to control it, but that the best use of your life is to express who you are as fully as who you are. Anyway, I don't know what prompted that, but hopefully that was enjoyable for you and not just a personal therapy session for me. If so, thank you. You've been great listeners. And let us take a few minutes of break. So my clock says 46. Let us come back at 57 and we'll finish the Dan Tiens and we'll dive into the chakras and hopefully do something grounding enough to help us finish our day together. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. All right, we're back. Let's finish the Dan Tiens so we can get into chakras. So the reason we're going into Dan Tiens, well, because this is a Qigong course and we might as well like get really grounded in that. Although, like I mentioned, chakras are part of a lot of Taoist traditions. Sometimes they're a little more hidden, like our microcosmic orbit in some presentations is really much more like a Kundalini yoga thing with various chakra stations. They just turned it into a breathing exercise. And so that's the deeper level. But what these have in common, to recap, is that these are power centers of the body. Or the other terminology I like to use is these are psycho-emotional centers, something like that. Why? Because of the exercise we just did. When you put your mind in your guts, you feel different than when you put your mind in your head. True, right? We just experienced this. So this is how I like to teach this. In case I attain the rainbow body and you're like, whoa, who's going to teach Qigong in 5 years once I've mastered this? And it's you. Well, that's how I like to teach it is I don't just say, oh, you got psycho-emotional plexes in your body. Do the exercise about it. Because then people, it's like, oh yeah, no, the head feels different. I'm a different person when I'm in my head than when I'm in my belly, or versus when I'm all three. So psycho-emotional power centers of the body. And the Dan Tiens are, you could say, like the big three, right? So it all kind of depends on how you divide things up. And this is a great way to start because it's simpler. It would take a long time if we had to walk all of our different chakras. And really, we do have kind of a head, heart, and gut. It's a little more, I suggest, go walk from your solar plexus, but the distinctions, they become finer distinctions rather than like the gut feels really different than the heart, feels really different than the head. So that's kind of why we are using these. Later, we'll come across some classical inquiries that you get into if you're in these traditions for a while, which is like, wait, are the Dan Tiens and the second chakra the same thing? And you will see, part of that work like in the late 70s, early 80s, 90s, and then people are still doing it today. The expression I learned from the Lama is called measuring milk by the yard. And so you try to reconcile each of the traditions like as if they were saying the same thing, but we just have to figure out how to translate them. And sometimes they are, but other times they're really not, and we should just let them be their own thing. So that Dan Tiens versus second chakra one, it's a little tricky because sometimes they are the same and others they're not, depending on the context and what you're calling the second chakra, and etc. Whether you're using a 5 chakra system or a 7 or a 6 or a 4. But let's finish off the 3 Dan Tiens because this is a very useful model for you. One way that this is a cross-cultural model actually is in the Tibetan yogas. In Tibetan yogas, the whole point is to get all the prana into the center, into the central channel. We, I think, have talked about this in other practices, but what the central channel represents, what you experience if you're tuning to that central channel, is it's like your essence. It's like the essence of being. And then in Tibetan yoga, they say, and then you've got these right and left nostril channels. And if you're over here to the right, you're likely to get too aggressive. And if you're over here to the left, you're likely to get too attached. And that's all because you've blocked off the center. And so you're likely a little too ignorant of how things really are. And so what they try to do in the Tibetan yoga system, pretty much, excuse me, just had a nice little banana hiccup. They're trying to get those duality channels to flow into the non-duality channel. And this gives rise to certain meditative experiences. So that's why, like I'm saying, oh, the central channel represents your essence, but in another sense, it is your essence, right? It's not like it's both that you are visualizing stuff that represents other stuff, but as you visualize it, actual things are happening in your consciousness. It's not like a Victorian England, you're like, oh yes, now I've performed the visualization ritual, and therefore I affirm that I am one in the center of my, no, you are in the center of your being. Anyway, just to finish this off, these channels are very much like America, because they're red, white, and blue. You got a white channel from your right nostril and a red one from your left nostril and a blue one in the middle. But there's also another division that's less well known, which is that in the central channel, you have a white center and a red center and a blue center. And these also want to be harmonized. These also want to be harmonized. So just for the future, this is not a yoga I'm teaching you, but in case you come across it, just to give you a little cross-cultural context, it's very similar to what we've been doing, because the white center is called the father drop. And it's about this like experience of meditative unity. The red center is called the mother drop. And this is actually where you ignite the inner fire, which is this very passionate, dynamic thing. And then in the heart center, when you reunite those, this is another way of inducing that experience of non-duality, direct perception of reality, something like that. So just so you know where these happen in the alchemical realm. So for us, just to keep it concise, we cultivate the lower Dan Tiens first in Taoist training because you want a stable foundation. You want a stable foundation. And then as well, this is like in psychotherapeutic methodology, as we found out through many destabilized folks in the 1960s, right? Just doing a bunch of acid or spiritual technology without any supervision from your elders can lead to a fragmenting of your psyche, That's the opposite of what we're considering health in temple style integrative arts. We want an integrated psyche, right? And so you do that, and then you have to go get counseling, or you have a Kundalini crisis, or you have this kind of stuff. That in this model would be because you did not build a foundation. And part of that is you actually, before you get rid of your ego, you have to craft a functional one. So this is for the level 2 Qigong teachers to be, and coaches, and all of you, aside from what authorities all grant you, you have your own offerings that you're giving others. And this one is beautiful, in my opinion. Just take it right now and run with it. Is that before ego transcendence, you actually have to have a moderately functional personality. Because otherwise what you're doing is this is where they call it spiritual bypassing. You're bypassing this work, and unfortunately it doesn't make it go away, right? It just goes into like repression. So that's kind of the reasoning in this metaphorical landscape of our energy body. You start down at the bottom. And we did some of this in that compassion alchemy retreat, when the alchemy of creating the jewel this is in alchemical traditions all over the world. That's actually consolidating the new center of gravity, right? So in that compassion alchemy work, the new center of gravity is that earth pot, that golden Dan Tiens we mentioned earlier. It's the ability to come to whatever's arising with compassionate and empathetic embrace, right? And so if we were to do this as like a mystical work tradition, what we would be, the work of the lower Dan Tiens would be attempting to, okay, right now my personality is based on what my thoughts tell me to do, what my emotions tell me to do, what my physical instincts tell me to do, right? But what would it be like if my personality were based on open-hearted, compassionate empathy, meeting every situation with that grounded embrace? And that is the work of crafting this stable lower Dan Tiens. Am I making sense to you? Are we groovy? Okay. Is fun? This is extremely exciting to me, but I never know if it's exciting to anyone else. Okay, cool. So already we have something really cool that we can, as Qigong teachers, as yoga teachers, as folks, you can really help folks who have dabbled into spiritual stuff, or who are who are philosophers, or like, excessive weed smokers or artists. Like, we all do this crap to disassociate from the pain of our fractured ass ego, because that thing is painful. But the trick is we actually need to integrate a more functional persona, and that's the work of the lower Dan Tiens. So in Taoist tradition, that's why you start there. Now, one thing you may come across is some teachers will say that, oh yes, for men in Taoist tradition, they start with the lower Dan Tiens, whereas for women, they start with the middle Dan Tiens. Gender essentialism, much. Fictive gender binary, much. It's giving patriarchal colonialism of the early 2000s. Okay, but there are, without becoming gender essentialists, there are some pieces here, maybe they're cultural, maybe they have to do with estrogen, oxytocin, progesterone versus testosterone in systems, and like how big your corpus callosum is or whatever. When they say that, they're talking about the experience of many folks is that, and I would say just from acculturation at this point, we could talk about many women have been taught to create their personality based on their relationships, which is this center. And many men have been taught to base their personality on what they fucking think is right. And that's that lower center, right? So it's just language conventions, right? So, if you have someone who's getting into alchemy, whatever their gender expression is, and they tend to be swayed by whatever everyone else is doing around them, then they would need to consolidate a little bit of actually reining in this heart center, right? Whereas if somebody was like a rugged American individualist, right or wrong, they actually would need to open this dang thing first before any of that work, because they can't get this idea that they're not their instincts or their thoughts, right? They think they are their persona. Okay, so, but you will see these models in there. Okay, so in training the Dan Tiens, where this can go wrong, this is something you as Qigong folks can assist others with, is that sometimes people who have been cultivating martial arts, who have been doing Qigong practices, Kundalini practices, things like that, occasionally they will find themselves becoming more aggressive. They will find themselves becoming uncomfortably sexually motivated. They will get the toxic guru syndrome of they actually have a great degree of personal magnetism and charisma, and then they use that to find people who are temporarily out of their mind in their energetic field and to have sex with them. And it's not technically a non-consensual thing, because what could you point to on paper? But for yogins, we would say, oh yeah, you overshadowed them with the magnetism you've cultivated in your energy field. And then when they come to their senses in 3 days, they're going to wonder what the hell they were thinking. Okay, these are some of the pathologies that come from a strong lower Dan Tiens. Okay, pathologies that come. So we're not saying any of these are just benign or malevolent, but this is like the yoga teacher. Okay, let's say he's probably a guy, because this is statistically how this goes. And he's in his body. He's got this inner fire going, and he's getting laid all the time with these yoga babes. And then they all, like, you'll be hearing on the street, like they feel there's something wrong with this situation, but we can't quite nail it down on paper because we are sexually free people. Something's wrong. This would be, he's got a charge in his lower Dan Tiens, and he's using it in a way that, isn't necessarily of greatest benefit for all of us, right? So same thing happens with martial arts. They're doing, like traditional martial arts, they're doing all of this cultivation on this belly. They're getting very embodied, and now they just want to pick fights with people, physically or verbally or philosophically in college class or whatever. So this would be an imbalance, or let's say an overdevelopment or a segmented development of this lower dantian, right? It's embodiment without dignified embodiment. Okay, so that's cool. But then who is this for? Well, this is for folks who are like, oh, I can't stop thinking. I can't stop thinking. In Zen meditation, many schools focus, your main focus is you watch the breath on at your lower dantian. You don't, you guys know this meditation, right? Watch your breath, notice your breath. So if you think too much, you don't notice your breath here, you don't notice your breath here, don't notice your breath here, you notice your breath moving your lower tummy. And all of a sudden the thoughts should go, zhoo, and you get to have a biological moment. I'm just biologying. Oh, right. This is where they say proper posture is enlightenment, because that's that embodiment. So you're practicing dignified embodiment to get out of your head. Okay. What about people whose Qigong, they do their practice and then they meet a new friend and then their practice falls by the wayside, right? And I'm speaking in terms of Qigong and yoga, but you'll see this in therapy. You'll see this with your voice clients, right? People's Qigong practice goes to shit when they get a boyfriend. It just, their priorities shifted. Okay, and we would not diagnose, don't say diagnose. We would assess that as this center being out of touch with this center, right? So instead of dignified embodiment over here, I'm not embodying, I'm disembodying out that way, right? And then obviously people who disembody up this way. So we want to focus on this dignified embodiment. Okay, then the heart center. So this down here, Taoists start down here in general. Some folks, if you can't calm down enough to focus on your dantian, they'll focus on this third eye chakra. And then once you've got the mind quiet, they visualize it like a little light that goes down into the dantian. Similarly, in the Tibetan yogas, in most of like in the inner fire tradition, inner fire generally starts down at that lower tummy center. And they say in the classics, they say, oh, you could get prana into the central channel through any of these centers. But like the heart center tends to have some knots of ego around it, that if you start fiddling with them, it'll screw it up more. And so in the inner fire tradition of Tibetan yogas, they say, oh, pull the prana into the central channel in your tummy, and that'll actually drain off some of the ego. It'll feel so good. You'll forget about your ego grasping, and then you can work the heart later and it'll go just fine. So they as well have this similar idea. Okay, so in the heart though, who does this? Sufis do this. Sufis do this one. If we have this basic three center ideology, Sufis, Bhakti yogins, any devotional style of work is going to start with the heart center. I was surprised because I was a Taoist when I became a Sufi. Yeah, that's actually allowed. In the type of Sufis I was hanging with. They're like, oh yeah, we got Taoist, Taoist Sufis, Buddhist Sufis, Hindu Sufis. They're all Sufis. So I was like, oh yeah, we focus on the dantian. They're like, okay, everything starts from the heart. I'm like, what? Are you kidding me right now? But in that case, the idea was like, you're going to start from compassion. Wow. Okay, if you study Gurdjieff and Ouspensky, do you remember these guys? Esoteric. They were some of the probably right after the Theosophists, G.I. Gurdjieff's writings came out. Anyway, Gurdjieff, his whole thing was the fourth way. This is the fourth way teaching. And what does that mean? It actually means that center of gravity we were talking about with our lower dantian, the new center of gravity. So you're not basing yourself off of your instincts, your emotions, or your thoughts. You're taking a fourth way, right? That integrated sort of compassionate center of gravity. Okay, so that the fourth way is actually related to the lower dantian. Then the fifth way is related to your middle Dan Tiens. And these are generally, just in case you run into this terminology, these are like the devotional schools. So this is sometimes if you were to meet someone who, I don't know, they're your Qigong student, you're coaching them, or they're just your buddy and they're trying to figure out their way through this thing called life, and you're co-empathizing, co-counseling, and they're just into Jesus and Mary Magdalene. We know some of these folks, right? They're into it. They're like natural devotees, right? Your job is not to go, oh, you should skip all that and focus on your lower Dan Tiens, because they have a natural gate, right? That devotion stuff is hard to come by. That is hard to come by. And so the tricks is you learn, Lama calls it exemplar yoga. So it's not like you're worshiping Mary Magdalene and Jesus. You're actually really doing the what would Jesus do as your practice. So you worship enough to get the chi flowing, and then you go, oh, what would that be like? But because you have this like respect and adoration, it makes it that much more intensive in your embodiment. In the Tibetan traditions, this is where you like visualize the deities and stuff like that. And so there's an outer deity practice where you like worship them. And then there's a practice where you become the deity, like empowers you, and then you get to be the deity, right? And there's other stuff going on, but for our purpose, that's all it is. It's like you develop like, oh, I'm so into White Tara. White Tara is so cool. I wish I could be like White Tara. And then White Tara is like, granted. And then for the rest of the day, you have to act like, okay, what would it be like if White Tara found cat piss in the toy box? How would she go about that? And you can see what an exercise that would be in this heart chakra thing. And maybe some of that, like the knots, right? Like how hard that would be is how easily this thing gets ego crusted, right? And so they say, so you start to get the sense of this, like just without all the esoteric inner fire and all that, is like, oh, but what if you did some Qigong first? That's a lower Dan Tiens method of embodiment. Then you tried to be White Tara. It works a lot better, right? Because you've de-encrusted the ego and then your heart center can function properly. So these are some of the ways. Okay, so what goes wrong here? Well, this is where you have grandma and she's up late at night, and then the pastor comes on the TV and they playing the devotional music and they say, send me all your money. And grandma's not stupid. She's just a devotee. And her heart center just opens up to the exclusion of her lower Dan Tiens center. And there went your grandkids' college extra bonus money. Crap, right? That's a path. And so similarly, like I can't judge anybody's particular path, but so that's why we're stereotyping, right? If you went off and joined ashram when you were a kid, that might have been great for you. But there is this thing of like, you meet your first Krishna consciousness person, you go to the kirtan, wow, and it's so expansive and so opening that you just ditch all of the, like you fail to take care of your parents who might need you or something like that. And then similarly, the other way is like, because this is just the compassion and that has the passion in it, right? Is like you fall in love with someone and you're just off to the races every time because this thing is more active than the other ones, right? Does that make sense? A little bit of just thinking about these centers. So hopefully we're, it's not too much in old news. Hopefully this is a good contemplation if we can start to see like, where am I like that? Oh, right. So like, oh, if I did that, where am I like that? I started cultivating some devotional stuff once upon a time. And then, wouldn't you know, Murphy's Law, the lineage that I was just like, oh, okay, I'll experiment with it, and then all of this dirty laundry came to light about the lineage I decided to experiment with devotion in. And so now I'm in a case, my work is where my heart center, that Dan Tiens in terms of that like devotional quality, it's kind of like, no admittance. Yeah, you seem nice, but nice people also sometimes use the same words as cult leaders. I don't know which one you are. So we're just going to err on the side of nope. Right. So like that would be where my work is to find the balance between lucid wakefulness, dignified embodiment, and open-hearted compassion. Where can I be devotional? Where can I be communitarian? Where can I be in love without sort of sacrificing my insight or my groundedness? Okay. And the fifth way schools, a lot of them, they won't teach you that because they're a fifth way school. They're not a full spectrum school necessarily. Some of them might be, but a lot of time they're like, yeah, just worship Krishna. And that works if you're lucky, right? It works if you're lucky. But where we sort of non-dual full spectrum yogins come into play is we go, well, one way to get lucky is to work with all three centers instead of just one, right? To go for congruence and integration. Okay, let's do the head center and then we'll finish off this chapter. Okay, yeah, did we finish the heart? I think we finished the heart. So we got pathologies and benefits, right? The one thing I liked about the Sufis that I studied with is they went through this whole, like I stole that walking meditation from the Sufi lineage because it was so good. I was like, oh, dude, I'm doing that in Taoist class. This is perfect. And then they were like, and we start from the heart. So it's like they had that as a method grounded in an understanding of that would be like a fifth way school for me that seemed like, oh, that's really cool. That's really balanced. This is great for people who are naturally devotional. And then my Sifu school, where I really gravitated, it was great for people who are naturally like warrior types. Right? It's like, here's how to cultivate your chi. Here's how to fight with it. Here's how to do stuff with a sword. This is great. It's very lower Dan Tiens-ish. Okay, so the upper Dan Tiens will be very attractive to people who are naturally kind of transcendent. I mean, obviously, this is spiritual bypasser's delight, right? You can't really be a spiritual bypasser in this one because you still want to have relationships and feelings and stuff. This is the way to go, right? Because then it's like, oh, my devotion to the guru didn't turn out, but I was really just devoted to the ultimate, and the beautiful ones of this, like, who is it? Like, Ramakrishna, is that the dude's name? Anyway, the guy who was like, his whole thing is just like the pure witness, right? Just no other technique, but witnessing, right? And then like Krishnamurti is another example of this. I'm not conversant enough with his stuff to have an idea of whether it's balanced or not, but it was a whole thing of inquiry, right? We're just subjecting all of this to this spiritual inquiry, and it can become kind of disembodied, right? Like if you tell your earth-centric femme friend, like, hey, let's get into some Krishnamurti, they will say, ew, that's cringe to the earth-centered femme part of us. That's some cringe business. But to this father drop of consciousness, oh, what do you mean? Nothing but the subjective witness, like pure subjectivity? Wow. So like in Buddhism, this is the contemplations on emptiness. And this is like, that's the thing about that we started getting to, like with the no control, for example, you could do that as a Buddhist contemplation on emptiness, that like, okay, let's take all the people who try to make money in this life. Anyone who works hard always makes a bunch of money. Oh, nope, that's not right. Okay, anyone who doesn't work hard always makes a bunch of money. Nope, that's not right. Well, shoot, then it seems like there is no strategy that works 100%. That's right. And then you like rest in that. And I don't know, is this boring enough for you? Earth-centered types? Cool. But the way of practice is you rest, what is it? Let's call it destigmatizing not knowing. Destigmatize not knowing. So all day, every day, we run around and we're like, what am I going to do about this? What's the best strategy for this? How are we going to take care of the kids? How am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to take care of the husband? Oh, well, taking care of myself is, probably won't be able to do that and take care of the kids. So I'll sacrifice myself and take care of the kids. Oh, but then if I sacrifice myself too much, then that and that and that and that. And the emptiness meditator goes like, you know what? You're not in control. There actually is no strategy that if you just think about it enough, it's going to work 100% of the time. Right? Even the insurance companies know this, right? They have to account for the acts of God or whatever it is. And so there's a piece where if you can suspend, if you can witness, can we witness the part of the mind that wants to know the right strategy? Is that pretty easy for us? Right? If you can witness that and then be in the witness and just not think that that mind is so important or that it has any fucking clue, you're doing upper Dan Tiens, 6th way type practice, right? So this is really great. And you'll see this in a lot of the old yogic meditations, right? They just meditate on the third eye until their body dries up and their spirit like leaves the body or something like that. And this is similar in the dudes who hold their arm up forever, right? That's the opposite of dignified embodiment. Now, it might be dignified, but it is disembodiment. They're trying to prove that my body doesn't matter. I'm just the mind. I am just the mind. Okay, so this could be really cool. So when might we train this? If you're going to become a Navy SEAL and they're training you in like stoicism tactics that like the Spartans used or whatever, so that if somebody sticks a bamboo under your fingernail, you're like, yeah, screw you. Got any more toothpicks, sucker? Because you're like, I ain't my fingernail. I'm my values, bro. What? I'm Jean-Luc Picard, sucker. I'm gonna keep the codes to planet Earth's defense system. There's no way you can get out of me unless you put one of them bugs in my ear, right? So that's a tactical disembodiment. That's a tactical disembodiment. And then similarly, in the toggling thing, right, is, hypnosis, right, is an aspect of this. Like I did this last time I had to have a shot. I told you this in class, like I have like some weird medical trauma, so that even though in my mind, I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's just a stupid needle, my body goes, ah. So I did hypnosis, like self-hypnosis off of YouTube. And I went in there and it's like, no, actually, all this stuff might be happening, but your consciousness can do whatever it wants. And I just told myself that. And then that problem went away. I was like, what? This is epic. And so you can see how, spiritually speaking, this could be really valuable. If we wanted to cultivate a degree of unconditionality toward life, right? Then there's this method. I'm not really good at it, but like, there's this method where you could be having a blood sugar crash, and then you don't act like a jerk to others because you know you are not your blood sugar crash. You are spacious, abiding consciousness. That's pretty neat. That would be upper Dan Tiens practice. Hypno babies. I love this. And then, so the cool thing with something like hypnosis in pain relief, natural childbirth stuff, is that you could do it from these various Dan Tiens as well. So this one is like, it's very effective. You can kind of dissociate from experience. One of these techniques, okay, if you need to try this from a neurolinguistic programming technique, if something's about to flood you, imagine that you're watching yourself about to get flooded from like 5 feet back there. Or if you have a memory that'll flood you, watch it from 10 feet away, shrink it. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yes, that memory, of course. Then there are other methods where you love yourself and others so much that the discomfort of that situation doesn't matter, right? That would be more of a middle Dan Tiens type of thing. Lower Dan Tiens, like for pain relief, would usually be more of like reframing of sensation, right? So you actually, I learned this in a breathwork style, you go deeper into the sensation, but with the frame that these are just feelings And then the secret, they say, is all feelings at their deepest level are actually a cosmic orgasm. And so then you breathe, you do a body method, and you create so much space in your sensorium that pain, which if it were in here would be like, now it's going boom, boom, boom. And then it becomes a cosmic orgasm. Yeah, orgasmic birth, right? So you could see 3 different Dan Tiens approaches to this type of thing. What am I referred to with the number of ways in relation to Dan Tiens? Is that a thing? Outline of ways segmenting each of these come froms. I don't know. My brain's getting too sloppy to be able to read that question. So these are your 3 Dan Tiens. I think that was the entirety of the transmission that I wanted to offer you on that. How does that feel? Any remaining questions, any complaints, any shouts of hallelujah? What say thee? Is that a hallelujah, Kat? Okay, great. Great. Okay, excellent. We got a little applause. Perfect. This is perfect. I think Matthew might be typing something, so I will wait for it. Oh, wait for it. Oh yeah, the 5th way, the 3rd way, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so if we were to relate those, 4th way is the lower Dan Tiens. 5th way is related to the middle. 6th way is related to the upper. So in case you run across some of those, I'm not trying to teach you that right now. In case you run across those, then yes. Oh, what are 1 through 3? Walking through life as if you were a collection of instincts, number 1. Walking through life as if you were a collection of emotions, number 2. Walking through life as if you were a collection of thoughts, number 3. And then reacting from that place as your center of gravity. And according to the Lama, 1, 2, and 3 are not higher than one another, right? But you can get in battles about that, right? If you're a Zen boyfriend, you definitely think that 3, thinking you're your thoughts, is more elevated than 2, thinking you are your feelings. And then the some somatic psychologists in the world will definitely know that thinking you are your instincts is much more evolved than thinking you are your thoughts. And even your emotions, because your emotions are just somatic expressions. An emotion is just a name, but what's underneath is direct sensation. Okay, so all of those 3 are reactive ways of being, and in that they're totally equal, right? So where's this framework from? I got it from the Lama. Take it or leave it. But you'll see 4th way in Gurdjieff Ouspensky's work. Okay, I am going to have a brain fart if we don't take a 5-minute break. It has to happen. So I'm going to go do some push-ups and eat a nectarine. Then when we come back, we're going to do some chakra practice, and then we'll finish up for the day. We're almost done for our day. So I'll see you in 5, por favor. Okay, we got to do the Granthi again because we weren't recording. So here you go. Interlace. Base of the skull, you press up with the hands, you pull your elbows back, you remove the head, inhale, 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 pause the breath, hands slip up, stretch, and then big sigh. That's nice. Okay, then shrug your shoulders up. Inhale more, pull them back. Inhale more, pull them in. Inhale more, pull them down. And then exhale. Let's do a little twist. This will help get the lower chakra knots. Very good. So this is back to Miko's question earlier, or I don't know if it addresses her question, but it addresses my answer to it, is by teaching all of this stuff, I got myself a little imbalanced up in my upper chakra and heart chakra. I was feeling a little anxious. And so actually doing bodily movement is going to distribute the energy. I can't do this without getting down into my Dan Tiens or hurting myself. Those would be the two options, right? So this actually will redistribute the momentary imbalance that I created, which is fine, you know, go out of body, bring back the transmissions, but just don't stay that way for too long. Okay, that feels good. Okay, let's do arm swaying. So you push and float, push and float, push and float, push and float on your own. If you want, you can breathe out as you push and in as you float, or you can just breathe naturally. And then once you got that, see if you can bounce, 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 bounce. So my knees do a little bounce, 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 bounce. Let's pull down heavens, inhale. Exhale through the mouth. All right, we're going to do a quick version of a little Tibetan chakra practice. So just put your hands on this. Inhale, go ear to shoulder. Exhale, chin to chest. Inhale up and look up. And then at the top, switch. Exhale the other side. And your eyes follow. So you inhale, the eyes look up, and this is going to help clear. Exhale, switching at the top, the throat, and that third eye region, because the eyes are moving too. So you use your intent, you just kind of ask within as you move, you know, may blockages in this third eye and throat area be released. Okay, let's go chin down and relax up. Okay, hands make Vajra fist, thumb on the inside. And we're going to go inhale and circle up and exhale back. So this is now working on the heart chakra region. There are a few of these for the heart chakra. That's about 3. Go the other way. And so again, as you do the physical movement, you're asking, oh, may I sweetly, gracefully, easily release blockages in this heart center. Okay, then the fun Tibetan stuff. You're going to inhale, and then you flap your wings 3 times and hit yourself. Inhale. It's fun. One more time. Okay, then hands out wide. You're going to slap and give yourself a big hug, left hand on top. And then you rock and you think inside, wonderful, wonderful me. And we're still loosening up that heart chakra center. Okay, other way. Here we go. Big hug. Right hand on top, slap. Wonderful, wonderful me. Relax. Okay, we'll do the gentle version of this one. So we're going to inhale. You're going to exhale 6 pulsing breaths. Then inhale. You're going to slap the sternum gently 6 times. And then relax. Okay, then we do Bhastrika Pranayam. So this is not to like over crazify your energy body. It's just to pulse this tummy. So this is exhale, the belly goes in. Inhale, the belly goes out. You don't have to do this fast, but I'll do it moderate. Here we go. Keep going. And this is to work this belly chakra. So you ask within, may it open. Okay, and then relax, breathe normally. Take a bit of a horse stance. And with your hands here, what this will allow you to do is belly dance your navel around in a circle. Round and round it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Okay, reverse it. Keep Good. Okay, come on up. And now you're going to do my favorite yoga pose called kick your own asana. And you're going to try to kick yourself in the asana. Asana is Sanskrit for seat. So you're kicking yourself in the seat. You don't have to reach, but some yogis can, and it becomes like acupressure percussion in here. But now we're just focusing on that pelvic floor region. Energetically, just asking, oh, may it be open and free from what you call it. And then we're not going to do the Tibetan thing where you would jump into a lotus pose and slam your butt on the ground. So we're just going to do jolting the body up. And you want to think about that vibrating this area of the body. One more time. Okay, trembling horse, inhale. And shimmy down. 2. 3. Pull down heavens 3 times. Inhale. Exhale, sigh it down. 2 more. And 1 more. Okay, we're going to do our basic Qigong of opening the 7 chakras. So as you inhale, you're going to gather to that pelvic floor area like, oh, is there an energy center right in the middle of the pelvic floor? As you exhale, you feel like it softly opens like a flower blooming. So the inhale is like you're envisioning, like bringing in light and chi, nourishment. Then as you exhale, blossom, blossom, blossom. 1 more time, inhale. And exhale. Good, now the belly region, there's no specific spot for you, just feel, where's that energetic center? The lower tummy. And we exhale, you feel it blossom. Now our hands are going to the front, but feel it as if it's like 360. Inhale. And exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Okay, coming to the solar plexus region. You're going to inhale right into the solar plexus, diaphragm level, and exhale. And imagine it just opens, it releases tension. Inhale like you're bringing in a nourishing light or chi. Exhale like it could just release tension and flower open. Once more. Good. Then to the heart, center of the chest. And once more. Good. Throat center. Here we go. Inhale. Visualize it like a clear light, like some force of wakefulness or compassion. Releasing tension, releasing stagnation, blossoming open. Good. 1 more time. The third eye center. Once more. Feel free to give your arms a break in between if you need to. We're going right into the crown. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. 1 more time. Release and float it down. Come down into the Wuji posture. Feel and notice. And then similar to how we did with our Dan Tiens, just take a feel and encourage these chakra centers to come into their optimal state of balance. Notice, were some feeling bigger than others, or some, whatever you notice, front to back. And of course, it's just a work in progress. You don't have to fix everything perfect right now, but just feel, are there places you could ask, oh, what would it be like if this expanded a little, or if that calmed down a little? And then imagine or feel that sense of balance. And we'll do pulling down the heavens just once. Inhale. Let's sigh it down. Oh yeah, groovy, groovy. All right, come on back when you're ready. Okie dokie. So we're in our last little half hour here, and we're going to get into these chakra centers. So 7 chakra Qigong. It lets you make a ch sound over and over. Chakra Qigong, chakra Qigong. Questions on that? How did that feel? Groovy? We're feeling good about it? So those of you who have been to all the Qigong level 2 stuff, you'll recall this because we introduced it in our last retreat. And so here's a little reminder. And then if you were to be offering this to a class, well, you have a sense of what that feels like, right? It's not too destabilizing, but it is pretty trancy, right? So you would want to do this when there was time to integrate. Not do this like as, oh, all right, well, see you next week. Have fun driving that tractor home. No, naughty. Although I do feel very grounded because at the end, these were all like, wow, infinite space. I'm like, itty bitty little root chakra. I was like, bro, excuse me. So that expansion was like, oh, okay. Yes, I'm a person in a body now, dignified embodiment. So really nice practice and quite simple. Then as we go, tomorrow we'll work with the colors and the Bija mantras for these centers. And we will also be learning about each center as we go. And so for you, as for more advanced practitioners, you can start to stack that in. And I hope to give you some ways that you can put this into your integrative life practice, chakra journalings and things, but also some ways you can integrate this into how you teach your yoga class, how you structure grief and mourning rituals, etc., because it's highly applicable. So no questions on that little set. It's pretty simple, right? You breathe it in, you expand it out. Here we go. Doing the opposite order at the end of class. I was never taught that way. So I was taught the bottom up. So I have no idea what will happen if you did that. Don't blame me if you try it. Of course, try it on your own. And then if it screws you up, do the 8 brocades and you should be fine. We have this method. Just do the 8 brocades and you should be fine. How would you integrate in a class? Lower Dan Tiens meditation? Yes, lower Dan Tiens meditation is great. Or you could have people talk it out. Like you could circle up and be like, how was that for you? Blah, 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 blah. And then do self-massage Qigong to finish it. Point tapping Qigong is like the big one, right? Because it's very similar to EMDR and the emotional freedom technique or whatever. Instapot is beeping. So yes, those would be some, so interpersonal exercises, if appropriate, and then physicality stuff. as appropriate are very good. All right, so let's do chakras. Let's do chakras. Here comes my whiteboard. I love this trick on Zoom. Okay.
June, I have a little question first with
Mhm.
the interpersonal piece of it.
Mhm.
Been in some meditations where there's the interpersonal piece that comes right after, and I just feel like, wow, I'm still in the meditative space. I don't really want to go into verbal. So
Yeah.
how do you work with people maybe being in different places with that?
Yeah. So in this case, like if it was like, okay, finish the thing and then we'll do an interpersonal as like a grounding method, what I would do is I would have us in the circle, and then anyone who wants to chime in, please feel free to chime in. And then you don't call on anyone, or you make sure people know it's not required. So then the still pleasantly disassociated friends can actually benefit from safe pro-social behavior without having to do anything. So that's one that I do. And then the other is sometimes like in a workshop environment or a deeper, more intimate environment, sometimes it is nice to do like dyad or triad, pod off, talk about the exercise. But I like to give people a little time to wait, or to again say, oh, this isn't mandatory, or to do like the point tapping or something like that. So those are some ways that can help make that work. Yeah. Okay, whiteboard. So chakra, what is a chakra? It means one of these terrible drawings, a wheel. Chakra means a wheel. That was awful. That was just bad. Chakra means a wheel. Oh wait, hold on. What else? Oh. Aha. Haha, technology is with us. Okay, best I can do for you. Oh, Dad, burn it. Come on, here we go. Fosh, let's go. Okay, we can pretend that's a wheel. So chakra means a wheel. And just for fun, we should learn the etymology of this. Chakra equals wheel, but in the Proto-Indo-European roots, that's fun to say when you're in cahoots. The root language behind, we suspect, Sanskrit and a bunch of the European languages, including Greek and Latin and Germanic and etc. The root word here is kar. And this is the same root word as you get as karma. And then it comes into our language as creation and cereal. Which, because kar, the root word kar means doing. Means like so karma just means action, right? So what create, like the doing, the cereal, it's growing, probably growing, I would guess is a cognate, but I'm not sure. So the root word is kar, and there's a Sanskrit principle here, which is called reduplication, which is a pretty redundant word, actually. I wonder if they were making a joke here. Reduplication. Because to duplicate is to do something over again, and then to so it's like to do something over again. So reduplication is when in some of these ancient languages, when they want to emphasize a point, they use the same syllable again. But this, I hope this is interesting to you. It's really interesting to me. And by the time we're done, you'll be more educated than most Westerners about what the hell a chakra is. In ancient Sanskrit, you don't reduplication by going kar. You have to make it a slightly different sound. And so it's chakra. Chakra are the root words for chakra. So chakra literally means a doing, and that's a wheel. Doing. So that's cool. Another word that'll come online for us is, okay, so let me just write this down here. Gur becomes show. Gur comes doing equals a wheel. Okay, so just another example of this for fun in your studies is the Sushumna. The Sushumna, which is the word in yoga for your central channel. And this comes from, just for fun to do a little Sanskrit stuff, this comes from the Indo-European root Esu, which is not related to the name for Jesus, as far as I know. The Sino-Arabic languages, no, Semeto-Arabic languages, the Arabic style languages are not actually related to Proto-Indo-European. Persian is, but then Arabic is not. They're different root languages to my knowledge. So not related to Isa, Yesu, Yeshua, whatever. But this is actually more related to the eurythmics. You remember, here comes the rain again. Was that Annie Lennox herself or the Eurythmics? Anyway, what was the Eurythmics song? I forget. But the Eurythmics was a band name named after, I think, because what's his name? Waldorf school, the Waldorf school dude developed a style of movement that he thought was going to be really good for kids, and he called it Eurythmics. And the EU comes from this Indo-European root esu, which means good. So eurythmics is like good rhythm. A euphemism is a nicer word, right? It's freaking nicer than the other heckin' words you might gosh darn use instead of a euphemism, right? I can't think of some others, but that's where it comes into in the like the Greek, I think, is where the EU comes from. So Sushumna comes from Esu, and similarly here, instead of going su to reduplicate it, they have to make it sound slightly different for the linguistics of it, and so they go su shu. And then the umna, I forget the exact root, but it's the same root from which we get hymn, like hymnal. And so your central channel is a good song. It's the good song. At the, like, your essence, what that means is like it's the best song in the world. Possibly referring to nada yoga, which is when you get into deep states and you hear an inner tone, that they say that's a sign of prana entering the central channel. Okay, why that's not just a tangent on the Sushumna about reduplication and Proto-European Indo root words is that in the ancient version of a chakra, at least according to texts like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and its peers, the thing about a chakra, contrary to what the hippies might tell you, is they're not so good. Chakras equals not so good in classical yoga. Why? Because, okay, we got blue pen. Here we go. Nope. Blue pen. Here's your, no, I want blue. Dag narget, undo. Format. Blue. Okay, let me try again. Blue. Okay, here's your Sushumna. Good song. The good song. And then in the midst of this good song, your two side channels, Ida and Pingala, come along like Ursula's tentacles, and they snatch the good song. So here's Pingala, and you can tell it's related to Indo-European root because it's pink. Pingala, it's the red one. It's the red channel. And then Ida actually means like white like a sheep, but you won't be able to see it because it's white. So I gotta use, we're gonna use purple, sorry, ancient yogins. So here's your Ida channel. And this is the 3-channel system of inner yoga. It's been preserved in Tibetan yoga. You don't see this a lot in Indian yogas that have come to America. but you do see them in their source texts. So when we're visualizing, if you ever went to one of my Tibetan heart yoga classes, they say, oh, visualize in the center of your body. And you can do this now as I talk, if you like to do a little extra practice, from the crown to the pelvic floor, in front of where your physical spine is, but it will feel like toward the back of the body, a central channel of light. Oh, yeah. And then you're supposed to visualize, like, from the right nostril, it's sort of the more aggressive energies in your body. And we'll visualize them as white for right now. And that channel goes up and then it comes down along the right side. And in your lower Dan Tiens at the bottom of it, it curls in like a little umbrella handle candy cane, and it unites with the central channel. And then on the left side, you have a red channel, and it does the same thing. It comes along the left side of the central channel, and then at the bottom, curls in like a little candy cane and enters the central channel. This is how you visualize this for yoga, because like I said before, in these inner fire yoga practices, you're trying to drain out the duality nostril channels and flush everything into essence, right? You're taking energy away from Ursula, the tentacle witch, and you're bringing it back into the good song. The metaphor won't last, but of your central channel. So that's their vibe. Now, this is how you visualize it in yoga. You won't have to remember this for your Qigong instructor, but this is just a larger cultural context of like chakras. What the hell's a chakra? So quickly, let me draw this. This is how you don't visualize it, but how they say it actually is set up. It's actually set up much more like the caduceus. And so this channel wraps around and then comes back to its own side, and then wraps around and then comes back to its own side, and then wraps around and comes back to its own side, and etc. And then similarly, you have the other channel wraps around and then comes back to its own side, wraps around, and then comes back to its own side, wraps around, and then comes back to its own side. And at each of these crossing points, you could see how if this central channel were like a nifty garden hose, and then you had other hoses crossing over it, that if they got too tight, they would kink off the flow in that central channel. Okay, does that make sense? Not the part where it's supposed to relate to chakras yet, but just my garden hose plumbing analogy, right? So this is classic yoga from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and its pure texts. Okay, so each of these is called a granthi, Granthi, granthi. When you usually see THs in Sanskrit, they're usually not granthi. It's a way they translate how to aspirate. So it's granthi with a h in there. Yeah. Sorry, I lost my train of thought doing all that aspiration. So here's a granthi. And then one of the ideas in this yogic philosophy is this central channel. If the prana is here, the energy in your body was in the central channel, you'll know you've experienced this because it feels like bliss or union or like hope or flow or interconnection between heaven and earth, right? We've had state experience of this, right? Usually after Qigong or during great sex or eating just the most epic strawberry color covered in chocolate or singing kirtan or something, right? Like you can have these peak experiences and you're like, whoa, oh, wow. And you know it's really a central channel experience because the three will come up at the same time. You'll have an experience of the emptiness or the totally open dimension of things. Like you don't care so much about your strategies of control because anything is anything. You have an experience of compassion. So you feel like this interconnectedness. And then you have an experience of bliss, like physical, it's trans-physical, but there's a blissful experience, right? So they say that that's a taste of central channel. Now, the opposite of that is when we get a mental affliction, an afflictive emotional or thought experience. And you'll remember, do you remember the last time you got frustrated so much that it affected you physically? Right? You had physical sensations of frustration. Somebody, please describe to me a physical sensation you've gotten when you were frustrated.
Anger.
Heat.
Yes. Heat. Okay, we had heat. What else?
Tensing up.
Where?
Well, for me, in my chest and my face and my hands.
Yeah. Okay. What else? Tightness in the throat. Yes. Shaking in the hands.
I feel like the whole head turned sideways.
Yeah, you get the vritti. You get a total vritti. They would say, and yogically, like that's actually the twining of those channels, twisting you up inside. Right? You're twisted up inside. Okay, so yeah, weakness and low blood sugar for sure. So one of the things they say, let me go back to my little drawing here. How they describe this is that it's not just that one of the reasons why afflictive emotions are so terrible, or like worry, right? And then you get a stomach ache, right? You get nauseous, and then heartbreak, freaking worst. And then there's actually a thing where, you know, the part that makes people mad about the last of those Star Wars prequels, oh, she died of a broken heart or whatever, like, but that's a real thing. Your heart actually like will enlarge when you go sometimes through significant heart, like the organ of the thing. It's a trip, man. Okay, so yogic physiology 101, they say it's a bummer that it not only does that side channel inflate, right? This is this feeling like, you know, is that there's this channel that runs aggressive energy, and now all the prana's in there, right? But it deflates the central channel, right? So you'll have noticed, like, it's very hard to be frustrated and see the interconnectivity of all things. It's very difficult to do such a thing. And so that's a bummer. But then the last bummer is they say that when that side channel is inflated, it's actually going to crimp off the central channel. And so you may have noticed, like, this would be the yogic physiology of why it's so hard to calm down and like come back to love. You know, like why some of us, if you've been in a relationship long enough ever, you'll have had this experience where you're like in an argument and then your brain is like, bro, you're being stupid. Like, just knock it off and then harmonize. Like, intimacy is just around the corner. And it's also totally impossible. It's totally impossible. Yogic physiology, they say, yeah, that's when that side channel is full, it actually crimps off the central channel and nothing can get in there, right? Because it's the anaconda has crimped it. So in one of the old yoga traditions, these are described as vining creeper plants, and they vine up and they choke the life force out of this tree of life in the center. Right, so that's a bummer, but you need to know about this yogic physiology if you want a classic view of the chakras, at least according to where our hatha yoga tradition comes from nowadays. So the last thing to know about this is what they say, at least in some traditions, is that in these centers, when they're choked off, just like if you had choked off a garden hose like this, you would get little pinhole leaks. And guess what? If you look down the top, those would look like the spokes of a wheel. So it would look like the spokes of a wheel. So this, according to how I was taught, is the etymology of this word chakra. And it isn't actually related to choke, as far as I know, but that in English, that's a good little association to make. If you want to know the classic idea behind chakras, they're chakras, right? So, so that's different than what we may have learned in New Age school, right? Like, oh, if you get this Muladhara chakra opening, then, you know, cool. Well, it's kind of the same, because if you got it to open, then that would mean that the prana is going into the central channel, right? But it wouldn't mean that you would get more petals on that lotus. It would mean that that the petals actually withdrew, And in just in case you need to know this stuff, in traditional yoga, part of that is what they call laya, which means dissolution. So this is where all of these sort of outflows have gone back in to the central channel and away from fictive dualism, right? I say fictive dualism because we're not trying to set up non-duality as the opponent of duality. It's like, well, no, non-duality is the way it is. It doesn't have any opponents, but how are you using it? how are we relating to such a thing? So anyway, that would be laya, dissolution. Okay, so all that is to say, now there are other ways of thinking about this. So when you think of a chakra as a lotus, sometimes this is what they talk about. These are also the petals of those lotuses in some systems. But then similarly, in another way of viewing it, which we do through medical Qigong, get my pen back here. All right, here's you. Okay, and it's a side view of you. Here's your hand. Okay, there's you. And the way these chakra centers feel, which is like a wheel or a lotus, is that they tend to come out here energetically, like a bit of an energetic funnel, and have a bit of an energetic whirlpool. That was the worst whirlpool ever, but hopefully you get the idea. And there are gates on the front and the back. Let's see if I can do that better. Which are access points to the central channel, And this is a little more like what you may have learned in hippie school, if you went like I did to hippie school, right? Is you've got, okay, so here's on the sacrum, the root one goes this way. It doesn't have a front and a back because it's in the middle, right? And then you've got the solar plexus. Then you've got the heart, etc. Right? So these also, when you get the metaphor of a lotus, doesn't work so well with the wheel here, but these do feel like they will flower open in that fashion. And as we'll learn a bit tomorrow, these become like access ports to that central channel energy, right? So in Taoist tradition, this is called the Taiji pole or the celestial stem. In yogic tradition, it's called the Sushumna, but basically it's the point of all this practice. It's the point of all this practice is that non-dual integration of bliss, emptiness, and compassion. Oh yeah. Okay, so just to finish out this convo for the moment, yes. Then the idea of opening a chakra, right? That's where the idea of like, ooh, your chakras, wow, your heart chakra is so big. And then the other yogic version of like, no, chakra, you've got chakras, you don't want that. That's a problem, having a chakra. Is this notion of opening a chakra. That's where the benefits come from. So in Tibet, sometimes in Tibetan yoga, these are sometimes called the crucial points. And it's a great translation because cruz means a cross, right? So crucial, meaning like, oh yeah, means X marks the spot, right? But in your central channel, it means that you've crossed up that central channel. And so this is where, if you read these Tibetan yogic texts one day without me, I don't know why you would, but maybe one day you will find yourself in that situation. They always talk about working at the crucial points. Working at the crucial points is the essence of yoga. And what it means is when we did this thing, it's because this is a major juncture where those guys cross over and it creates your throat chakra, right? So when you do this with your intent, and they do all kinds of like breath holding and different kind of stuff and visualization, it unkinks those knots so that prana can flow through the central channel in that locus, right? And this, okay, so that's very mystical. But if we went way back down to just like maybe chi doesn't exist, but body psychology does. These would be the places where if we get hit with a stack attack or a trigger, that's where we're going to clench down just physiologically, right? And so still there's these practices of visualizing red light or visualizing blue light, doing the movement, and you can actually open up a habitual tendency to cramp your throat, even if that stuff was just like we were speaking, just metaphorically. So what I want you to know, we're not doing so much in the Tibetan yoga thing today, but I want you to know, like, this is really the majority of the conversation on what a chakra is. That's where it comes from, are from these texts in starting out in like the 10th, 11th century in India. And then what happened then is that the naughty Muslims next door came in and started suppressing and killing people who weren't of their religious persuasion. And so that went underground, but some of it went to Tibet. So we have that 11th century tradition preserved really well in Tibet. And then it crops up again in some secret texts from the 14th century and then 15th. And then it comes back, like we said, at the beginning of the 1900s, when Indians wanted a more native, non-colonized version of health cultivation. They took those texts, the Royal Palace Gymnastic Manual, and they, according to one historian at least, fused them with warrior practices from the Knots, like wrestling practices and Swedish gymnastics, and they made what we call Hatha Yoga. But it all comes back to this crimps in the very good song, is what they're trying to work at undoing. They're trying to work at undoing that. So this was just great for me because it explained a great deal of my experience in spiritual practice. Like I would have, I have not been free of mental afflictions. I don't know what the mythology out there says in this life, but there have been some intensive ones. And I noticed throughout my practice that, like, I would go to the Sufi dance, and not always, but if I could get into the groove, we're doing these movements and we're singing, and by the end, I would have done a 180 from the like anxious, antisocial, hopeless, depressed person who I showed up there as. Really weird. When I taught shiatsu, was one of the best periods of my life because I would wake up as an anxious, grumpy, hopeless person. I would go and then I would lead them through the yoga exercises that we did before class. And then for the rest of the class, I was a person who was like in touch with non-dual bliss and compassion and could like just intuitively teach this badass class. And 10 years later, I learned that it's because that it's almost like in spite of yourself. It's like hydraulics, right? If you have the weird thoughts running the prana in a weird way, or you sleep in a weird position, or you eat some weird food, it'll crimp up these channels. And then if you sing enough, you can uncrimp them. If you just stretch properly, you can uncrimp them. So as we were doing those yogas in the Tibetan systems, they bang on it like you had a clog in your pipe, and you're like trying to break it up from the outside, and then they twist it around, and they're like working this plumbing to try to undo these chakras. Okay, groovy. This is our lecture on the etymology of the word chakra and where it comes from. And like I mentioned, I'll put it in the chat box for you. Hatha Yoga Pradipika. This is the main source text that style of discussing a chakra will come from as I share it with you. There's an earlier text that they found that I'm getting more into now, but for a while, this is one of the earliest texts that we knew of that made mention of the term Hatha Yoga. Like before the 14th century, that wasn't really a term. There was yoga in these like ritual practices to unite with God. And then there was the Yoga Sutras in like the 1st century of the Common Era, or maybe 1st century before the Common Era, somewhere in there, about zero AD. They use the term yoga, but the practices of moving your body and holding your breath and stuff like that, hatha means forceful, the forceful yoga. And it refers to trying to force these pranas out of paths that ruin your life and into paths that don't ruin your life. And it's kind of like, it's either for really advanced folks or really remedial folks like me. Like, well, you're not going to be able to meditate, dude. Your genetics like tend toward depression and obesity. But if you sit so your heel squashes your perineum, you'll feel a thrill up your spine. You can meditate on that and the prana will run right. And it works really good. And they call it the forceful yoga, hatha yoga. So there we are. We're at the end of our time, but so if you need to go, jump off, but I'll take like 3 more minutes in case there's just any talk back from that. And then tomorrow we'll start working the ladder of our chakras and doing some healing methods with those and stuff. So anything to say, commentary, question, complaint, corrections? Okay, was this useful to you today? Anybody want to tell me one thing that you found useful or enjoyable or intriguing?
It's nice to have the mystery taken away.
Good. That's how I feel too. So
I've heard these words forever. And now oh, okay, I get it. I'm okay. Yeah.
And so, this isn't definitive. There will be contradicting scholarly opinions. We're still learning the history of modern hatha yoga, right? Like that one story, there is good documentation for it, but it may also be like Krishnamacharya, one of the fathers of hatha yoga in the Ashtanga tradition. He may have actually inherited a Buddhist yoga system from Tibet. We're not, because he said he learned this from a secret text like in Nepal or something like that, but then nobody can find the text, and it reads kind of like, okay, no offense if you're Mormon or something, it reads kind of like the Book of Mormon, like, oh, I found the tablets, well, can we see them? No, they're too special, you just have to believe me. But it may actually be that like Krishnamacharya found a Tibetan yoga system, and then brought it back and gave birth to Indian, that's where Iyengar style came from. That's where Pattabhi Joy's system came from. And then like Bikram stole his stuff from them and so on and so forth. So we're finding out new stuff. But once we have some of these historical guide points, we can really navigate in a much more holistic way. Yeah, practices to feel in the body. Excellent. Yeah. What do you say, Kat?
A couple of questions. Is it the same schedule tomorrow? I don't think I saw it put up.
Yeah, 10:30 to 5:30 is the plan. Okay. Hopefully that felt okay with a 1-hour lunch instead of our big 2-hour like we used to do. So we'll play with that. Give you a kind of a shorter day. And
second question, and we can address this tomorrow because it might be a loaded question, but do you think there's any references in the Bible to anybody doing yoga, even as, oh, we saw these people doing some weird shit somewhere?
Oh, that's a good question. There are definitely, if you read from an ecumenical type mind like mine, then you hear like the Jacob's ladder story and you're like, oh yeah, it's a ladder to heaven. Muladhara, Svadhistana, and you can track that onto the Etz Chaim of the Kabbalah, right? And then, some mystics think that the flaming sword of the tree of life in the Kabbalah, a flaming sword of the angel who guards the Garden of Eden, is the ascending path on the tree of life, on the Etz Chaim. And that would be because in traditional Kabbalistic studies, that does track onto your body and on power centers of your body. And so they would say that would be a way to navigate that. But is it equivalent? Were they talking to each other? We don't know. My sense is that these are sort of universal motifs in our experience. And then each culture has found their way into them in different ways. And so we modern Americans do our best with trying to stay in cultural appreciation and not go into cultural appropriation, but also taking advantage of the universality that we have access to, right? tree of life in the central channel, tree of the knowledge of good and evil on the 2 side channels, blocking it off. And then you've got the flaming sword of inner fire going right up the middle. And then when Jesus is baptized, the dove of peace comes down like the dripping of the white element in the inner fire practice in Tibetan yoga. So there are a lot of correlates. And if you were a mystic, like we know in Christianity, Magi, for example, okay, sign off if you need to, this won't take long. We know the Magi, right? They were Zoroastrian. That's what a Magi means. These were Persian fire worshiping priest astrologers, right? Who came to bow to the Lord when he was born. Which, if any part of that story is historical, which we have no idea, it sort of signifies a connection somehow between this tradition of Magi and the Persians were Indo-European inheritors. So while if we could say, whatever aspects of Judaic tradition developed on their own is not, whatever got mixed with Persian tradition is then connected to this greater pan-Indian European stuff, which also then went into Tibet as the Bon tradition, which went over the Himalayas into Mongolian tradition and came into China as Taoism. And then Taoism went along the Silk Road and taught Vedic Hinduism how to reverse the prana up the central channel from their sexual practices. And that became part of Indian inner fire practice. So historically, too, it's also a weird ball of wax. And then if you know that Silk Road, there's aspects of the Bible and where the Gospel of Thomas ended up and stuff like that, where it's like, oh, that's Indian and Judaic tradition talking to each other. Right. And then the Muslim tradition, talking to the Zoroastrians and talking to Hindus and talking to Christians and Jews. So it's a fun question is all I can say. And we might hit some parallels as we go along. Let's hit them carefully. All right. Anything else before we go? This way to get me inspired before we finish class. Thanks, Kat. Appreciate it. So I hope you have a good night. Oh, balance that root chakra if you can, but taking a walk, eating a slightly heavier meal. This is not the retreat where I'm like, oh, stay on all light foods so you're totally out of your body tomorrow. No, we go up and away and then go eat some French fries if you can. And don't go and watch a horror movie, but do go and play that game where you're a cat walking through the post-apocalyptic thing or something. Just chill down. And that'll put you in a good position for tomorrow's liftoff again. Okay. Then goodbye. Pranam. Bless yas.